Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Martin. I'm not sure if this is his fourth or fifth time. And as always, we just talk about things going on in the world. And at one point we did actually get back to the purpose of the podcast originally, as Martin is the author of Children of the Dying Hearth. And he is now nearly ready to, I think, the third book. There's a trilogy. There's going to be 6 in total. And maybe one of these days on one of the podcasts, we'll actually get around to talking about that. Hello. Welcome back to the David Watson podcast for what I think is 4th or 5th time we've got together to just chat shit. And we've already been quite successful for 20 minutes when decided to press record.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were just talking about that interesting concept that has slipped into sort of the consciousness of people, that if you work a minimum wage job, you should be able to get a nice fancy mortgage and have a flash car. As though that was ever a thing.
Well, I feel like at one time there might have been some semblance of that. Maybe in a kind of post-World War II era, where the economy was just booming so much that houses were dirt cheap. But it's the thing we were talking about a little bit before is this kind of stepping stone careers.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a weird kind of ethos of like, this job is good enough for me. And I think Mike Rowe has a good bit about it, the guy who did Dirty Jobs, where it's like, you don't have to find the job that you just love going into every day, but the job that you do enjoy and you're good at. That's the bigger thing, so that you can then go in and not be miserable at work. And the example we were kind of talking about is the fry cook at McDonald's. Like, that was never meant to be I could pay all the bills and have a family of 4 job. This is meant to be a stepping stone to learn how to perform in a job market, how to interview, how to deal with a boss, maybe a good or bad boss, which we were also talking about before in those 20 minutes. Because I mean, there's all sorts of management styles out there, and it gives you an idea of what works for you, what doesn't. And I mean, I think for me, I worked in the service industry for several years, waiting tables, bartending, that sort of thing. And I know people that were in their 40s, 50s still doing it. And I mean, you can make decent money doing that.
Yeah.
But there's such a ceiling on that I mean, unless you're going to bartend on 5th Avenue in New York, you're not going to be making enough to go have the maybe the dream you wanted when you were a kid.
I used to know a girl, and she used to work in a local sort of restaurant that, you know, your run-of-the-mill restaurant chain. And this was when we were still largely a cash society. You know, so you're probably talking around 2010-ish, something like that, 2011. And she was a waitress. She was fairly attractive, but she was really good at communicating and was really good at making you feel welcome. And she used to make more in tips in a month than I did on my salary. But I would call her one of the outliers, because she knew that if she worked the tables properly, you know, and she used to work some 12-hour shifts sometimes as well. But she had the same energy first thing in the morning as she did at 11 o'clock at night. It was the same smile, the same welcome, and you could be the biggest piece of shit going. She'd make you feel like you were the best customer going. And some people have that talent, and she somewhere along the line, I don't know where or how she learned, or whether it's just a natural thing, she learned how to communicate with customers, and, you know, kind of that to that NLP level of the right thing to say to the right person, and like who's in charge of the table, who's paying the bill. She could tell you all of that in 30 seconds, you know, and who you need to flirt with, who you need to give your attention to, who you need to make feel welcome, who you need to make feel special. And she was good with kids, you know, and I would say something else she did that was very successfully. She was very good at not making wives feel jealous. So when families came and it was a big family dinner, the wife always felt appreciative, especially if the kids were playing up, she'd give the children extra attention. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. She knew how to do that, thing, being a mother herself. Whereas, some of the girls might over flirt with the husband, and then when it comes to the end of the dinner, the wife is like, "You needn't think that bitch is getting anything from us."
Yeah, it's like you mentioned,
she made a lot of
the whole NLP thing. It's a neat. This is what I found out waiting tables was the certain people are very intuitive with kind of reading other people. I mean, you could talk to some college campus person, they'll probably say they're an empath, and that all right, that's what you mean by it. But the point is, you can look at a table and say, who do I need to talk up? Who do I need to talk down? Who do I need to kind of is this a table that I can joke around with? What level of humor can I use? Can I use that level 5 dark humor, or does it need to be kind of a playful dad joke sort of thing?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that learning that skill is it helps beyond that, because then it helps with if you step into an interview for the next job that it's not waiting tables, let's say it's for a marketing position, right? Because it sounds like that sort of woman would do well in marketing, because you could walk into a room and see, all right, what is this company like? Who's the boss? How do I need to talk to them? Are they the type that just wants no BS, give them the facts? Or is it a jovial, joke around, have a good time, and by the end, I'm signing the deal? But you walk into that interview and you can quickly pick out, what sort of personality am I dealing with? How can I play with that to benefit me? And that's, I mean, I think outside of just learning that skill, waiting, any sort of service industry job, I think, is a fantastic thing for young people to do, because it shows you how terrible humans can be.
Yeah.
And it's such a healthy reminder to yourself to say, you know what, maybe I should be a little bit nicer.
Yeah, I agree. And
that's, yeah.
And also, I think it shows you the best and the worst of people, because it strips away a lot of misconceptions that somebody, because they do a certain type of job or have a certain position, might be really horrible or might be really nice. And I always remember, I was about to say I always remember, and I've now forgotten the comedian's name. I think it was Jim Davidson, but I could be wrong. But he talked about when he was a kid, he had a milk round. He used to help the milkman on the old milk round. And he said, and I found this when I worked in the car trade, doing the service desks and stuff, the middle classes were the rudest. The working classes, so to speak, and this is what Jim Davidson said, like, you could be doing, like, the terrace houses where everybody's the lowest wage, lowest incomes. They're the ones that always try and leave you a tip, and they were the ones that were always nice at Christmas and stuff like that. Do the middle classes, and the upper middle class, and they were just downright obnoxious. He said, and then you go and do the Lord of the Manor, and he'd be the one inviting you in for breakfast. How's it going, Jim? He said, and he said it was the people in the middle that were the worst. He said, but if you had nothing, you tried to give everything, and the guy that had everything didn't realise he had everything, but was the nicest host possible, and you should come into the kitchen, grab yourself a can of Coke out the fridge, here's a chocolate bar, and would leave you a lovely tip for Christmas. He says that he was the most approachable guy going.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, just I forget where I heard it, but there's a thing along those lines about the middle class, where it's, they have so much they want to gain, and there's such a fear of losing what they have, that they've made it kind of out of that lower class thing, so they don't have the they don't want to either re-experience, or they've kind of mythologized the experience of, I don't want to have to figure out where my next meal's coming from. I know where it's coming from. It's a TV dinner. It's not great for me, but I know I'm eating, right? They're there, but they don't want to have to think, I hope I'm able to eat tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like that sort of level of poverty they don't have to deal with. Whereas when it's the kind of lower class demographic, it's I was talking to a good friend of mine who's from Juarez, Mexico, who I think I've brought up
Yeah, you have, yeah.
before in conversations with you, that it's this idea of if your main concern is where you're going to eat next, or what you're going to eat next, or if you're going to eat next, where you're going to sleep that night, it makes life really clear. And so, you may have had that your meal, and you have a couple bucks left over, and well, a couple bucks, you're not going to save it. You're maybe transient. You're going from one place to the other. You'll make the next couple bucks in the next town. You might be actually more willing to give that away.
Yeah.
You don't have a bank account to put it into, and so it's a kind of easy come, easy go mentality. But yeah, that middle class, it's kind of a struck by fear sort of thing. Whereas that the high elites, where they have everything, sometimes they do recognize it, and it's this. What's it matter if I give you a full breakfast? What's it matter if hey, here's a $200 gift card? I see your shoes are ripped and torn. Like, go buy yourself some new shoes. Yeah. It's on me. It's because it's nothing to them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a similar mentality of whether you're dirt poor or whether you're at the top of society. Like, if it doesn't mean anything to you, you're willing to give it away. But for that middle class, it's like, I really want to get more of it, and so you value it so much more.
Yeah, you hold on to it for dear life. Because it's interesting, we were saying about the friar. You're a friar. It's supposed to be a stepping stone job.
Yeah.
But if you think like America, 1950s, and wherever you lived in America, every town, every small town, was thriving because you had all of these little industries. And being the friar, working in a diner or something like that, it was an okay job, but you weren't the bank manager, you weren't the lorry driver, you weren't the guy that was working the roads or something like that, but it was okay. And you could earn enough money, but you didn't have, even if you lived in a dirt poor area, it probably had a thriving town, so everybody had employment, or employment would be fairly easy to come by. And I was talking to a guy on here a couple of weeks ago called Don, I think his name was, and he was really fascinating story. His grandparents were in Louisiana, and them and some neighbours, I think it was, just literally got in their horse and wagons. And you know what I'm like for American history. I love that kind of concept. And they just settled down in East Texas. He can't remember why what was going on in East Texas. So when he still knew his grandparents as a kid and stuff. So they kind of told him these stories about hitching the horses to the wagon and just going across. And but he said, like, his dad was a fire ranger or a forest ranger, and that they lived on a few acres of land, sort of thing, and basically grew everything. And he said, so on one hand, there wasn't much money, but we didn't need much money either, because we pretty much ate everything, hunted everything, and so any money we had didn't really. He said, so one hand, like he said, it was a strange poor. He said, because like everybody, he said, we were kind of dirt poor, but like everybody, we had plenty to eat. And he said, and that's the thing, you could have those kind of low wages, but be living a really good life. Whereas now, if you have low wages, and the priorities have changed as well, because like now, poverty, there is a statistic, at least in the UK, that if you don't have the internet, you're considered below the poverty line. If you don't have an internet connection, because you can't afford one. And you just like, I understand that's important, but the last thing I would have considered a gauge for poverty,
necessary,
is I have to have a mobile phone? And
it's such a different society because we're no longer subsistent farmers. right? Like I, we have a small yard here that planted some grapes, planted some onions, tomato, like a couple plants of each sort of thing. And it's like, there's no way that we're going to survive the year off that.
No.
But it might offset some food bills here and there. It might, it's kind of fun to like, oh, the grapes are in, let's go pick some and have some. And, but for the situation you're describing, it's such a different time. It's like, no, you grow everything. So in terms of what you really need money for, it's luxury stuff at that point almost. So that I think is a funny gauge then for the poverty line, because what would have been seen as such a luxury 20 years ago is now the baseline. You need to have internet.
But it's like, even in like 1950s New York, if you were a lorry driver, you could still afford to live in New York. But lorry drivers didn't for 1 second, if you were a delivery driver or something, a delivery driver didn't for 1 second think he deserved the penthouse suite in Manhattan somewhere or Central Garden.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He was just like, no, I'll live in the suburbs and drive into work. Because, and I think there's this unrealistic balance of, that I sent a meme on Instagram, as you and I have started doing. We're still gauging the level of toxicity and bad humour we can send to each other.
Well, especially for you, but I mean, I'll send the worst. It's fine.
Yeah, we're good. Yes, I'm one of those people that, like, on WhatsApp and stuff, it's just like I have to gauge what's sent out to people, because some of the stuff I get sent is just like, oh yeah, man, that's dark.
Yeah.
But I sent this. There was this meme going around with this young man, and it's actually quite tragic. And of course, myself included, we're all laughing at him, and because he's crying because he's got to do an 8-hour stint at Starbucks, and it's not fair because his boss isn't scheduled on, and he's like moaning, and of course everybody in the comments like, "Welcome to adult life, son. This is called working." But he's actually having a breakdown because his life is unfair, because he has to have a job and he works in Starbucks and his shift is busy. Of course, he seems oblivious to the fact that he has time to make a video and post it online. But it's just like, there's nothing he said that anyone in the comments was just like, yeah, that's called working for a living, and you don't like your job. And he's angry because customers are coming in and it's busy and he doesn't think there's enough people on there. And it's just like, no, you work in what's called an environment that when it's packed, you're pushed to full capacity.
Yeah, and that's it. It again goes, I think, to that ethos thing that we were talking about just before, and then we started this with that. I mean, not to sound full of buzzwords, but I really do think it has the strain of that kind of Marxist, neo-Marxist, like everything should be fair. And it's like, listen, Buttercup, life's not fair. It doesn't matter where you are, what place and time you're at. Everybody has to work, which oddly enough is a Marxist, communist sentiment. But there's this idea that if we just dismantled capitalism, I wouldn't have to work 8 hours, 12 hours at Starbucks. It's like, no, then you'd have to work 8 hours, 12 hours in the fields. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Like, existence requires work. There's no animal in the animal kingdom that doesn't have to work to survive.
Well, I think I've said to you before. I
think that's actually the beauty of it.
Yeah, I think I said to you before. I used to have a girlfriend that lived in Moscow who was Russian and was from Moscow, and she was a few years older than me. So she grew up in communism and kind of become an adult as the wall collapsed, and obviously, so she remembers communism really well. Her mum was still alive when I went over there with her and visited Moscow. Do you know what I mean? And the way they talk about communism, it's capitalism under a different name. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, the higher up you go, the more privileges you got. The bigger your apartment was, the more your allocation of things were. And she said, we know that the top people behind closed doors were drinking champagne and eating caviar. Of course they were.
Yeah.
they got the best tickets to the ballet, they got the best tickets to this. They're not doing what you do. And in some ways, like her mum quite liked communism in many ways. She said because there were no bills. You just had water, you just had electric, you just had. So she says you were just, food was available. There was never no shortage of food for them. They don't at any point in their history ever regret.
For them.
Well, they said this idea that people used to be queuing up for food because of food shortages wasn't true.
Yeah.
She said that you'd be queuing up because something new had arrived. You know, so it's just like everyone's queuing up, or because things were seasonal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And because, of course, it collapsed in 89, didn't it? 91, 89, 91. Berlin Wall came down in 89, didn't it? And I think communism collapsed entirely in 91 or something. So, of course, you know, even in the UK in the 80s, fruit and veg was still seasonal. So everyone's like, oh, yeah, they didn't. Well, we didn't have it either. Supermarkets here didn't have strawberries all year round. That was something that came along in the sort of the late 90s and the early noughties. And, you know, this idea that you can just grow fruit all year round in big greenhouses never existed in the 80s. So it didn't for Russia either. And so, but she was saying this is like, so say come the winter time and you wanted to go and get your new shoes. She said, we're never short of shoes, but you might have a choice between the grey ones and the black ones. That would be the option. You know? And that's how it was. But she said, but the other thing that people don't talk about is it was illegal not to work. If you couldn't find a job or something, and you might be allocated a job, oh, right, we want you to work out. That's not what I want to do. You can do that, or you can go to prison. But I don't want to be a sewage worker. Nobody cares. We need sewage workers. You don't have a skill or a talent that we need. So you will go where you're told to go. So this, like, you know, like now, well, I'll go to university and I'll do this, I'll do that. It doesn't matter. If you come out of university and you've got a degree in something nobody gives a shit about, you'll go exactly where they, because as far as they're concerned, academically, you're worthless. And so it's this misconception that everything was better and that capitalism... No. And I think also as well, people now confuse what once we would have described as capitalism today is really globalism. And it's like, you know, companies, one organisation might own 500 companies. You know, and we used to call them conglomerates, didn't we?
Conglomerates,
And now that's become much more of a norm. And these people, whereas, you know, they've got companies and organisations in every country in the world. And whereas once upon a time, a company was big if it was national. Well, now it's only big if it's global, you know.
That's the more push we go towards, I mean, company, I think it was Nestle, which owns a ton of brands to the point where they can monopolize entire markets with their 5 different brands of, I mean, for me with a daughter, baby food. That it's hard to find like a baby food that isn't owned by one of these big global corporations. And it's almost sad that to me that the world has gotten smaller in that sense. There's I think you mentioned the story that you loved of the people just kind of picked up and moved to Texas. That's funny enough, actually, kind of the story of my grandpa, who his brother was out here in Oregon.
I remember the very first podcast you said about that. Yeah,
and he's from Tennessee, and basically his brother said, "Hey, if you come out here, you can make $0.25 a day." And my grandpa was like, "That's great." Packed up his stuff, left the next day, and they him and his brother married these 2 sisters. And the 2 sisters married 2 brothers, and it was that's more or less how my dad's side of the family came to be out here. But it goes back to, I think, whether it's the Starbucks worker saying, "Why am I not making more off this?" There's not just the kind of ethos of I should be given more for a basic or no skill job. It's this almost unwillingness to uproot and try new things elsewhere outside of for whatever reason, college. College is the one thing, university, where as a teacher, I see it all the time. I don't think any of my students, if I offered them, like, there's a job out here in Texas that pays 150,000 right now. They'll train you for it. Do you want to go do it? And I think most of them would probably say, I don't know, but TCU or University of Texas or these universities out there, maybe I'll go study engineering out there. It's like,
yeah,
what is, why?
Yeah, it's that weird thing. I remember when I was 24 and I had a house with a girl and we split up. And, like you do when you come out of a long-term relationships, and, it was fairly serious. We'd bought a house together and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, yeah. I didn't know what to do, but I remembered that before I'd met her, I was about to move to London. And I thought, well, I'll just go and do that then. I'll just go and get a job in London and move there. Mm-hmm. And I just had one guy that I knew who had a spare room that I could rent. And I just did it. It's just like, this is a plan. Yeah. And 5 years later I came home, but it's one of those things where I think everybody should move for a few years, just move away, go and get a job somewhere where you don't know people and you have to figure shit out for yourself. And I don't care if you're doing it with the army, the navy, do you know what, I'm just going to save up some money, go and work in Starbucks in a state 4 states away, or at least a different time zone away. It doesn't really matter what it is. You should just go and experience living somewhere else where you don't know people and you have to start again, because it takes you out of a comfort zone that doesn't do you any good, and it makes you much more aware of chasing and looking for opportunities.
Yeah, I think we talked about that the first podcast together. Because that's kind of gets at the main message of my book, Children of the Dying Hearth. It's like, get out of that comfort zone, and go do the scary thing. And it's, I just think it's so strange for that we've gone to this time period where there seems to be a real fear of getting up and moving somewhere new, especially when you're young, single, like nothing to ground you. And that's it. I will say that's definitely a feeling I see in the West. Other parts of the world don't have that issue at all.
No.
But I think that actually might get to, and I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here. This isn't a well-formulated idea. So feel free to bat it down. That I think that could be because the West is more or less the middle class of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy.
Like, it's what we were talking about with the middle class being afraid to lose what they have. It's the same sort of thing of the kid who maybe grows up in a well-off household. They don't want to tank everything for their family. They're unwilling to risk it. Whereas the migrant worker out of Guatemala saying, like, I got nothing to lose. I'll walk for hundreds of miles and I'll go work in a strawberry field in California to send money back home. Like, that's totally fine with them because they're not losing anything. They're gaining
It's amazing. Me and my friend Duncan, every year, we've been doing this now for, I think, about 15 years. We go on holiday. There used to be a few more of us. It's just me and Duncan now. And at least for the last 10 years, they've been surfing holidays. And we go either the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks of September sort of thing. And now typically more the first 2 weeks, because we predominantly, well, not predominantly, we just stick to the west coast of France, a little bit of Spain and Portugal sometimes. And that's just because planes don't let you bring 10-foot longboards on them anymore. You used to be able to put them in under special luggage, and they just don't let you do it. So it's like, well, we can't fly anywhere anymore. So we've just been driving to Europe. And whenever we do this, like the one time we did it in California, we just hired an RV and drove from San Francisco down to San Diego, and then back up through Yosemite Mountains, back up into San Francisco. And people say, I'd love to do what you do. We'll go and do it then. I don't even know where you start. Well, typically, my holiday to France is Duncan and I will book the ferry that we need to get over. We haven't done that this year because we've got a slightly different plan. And 2 or 3 days before we're due to get on that ferry, we will look at the weather and see where it's sunny and where there might be surf. And then we'll look for a campsite to stay at. And that will be 3 days before we're about to leave. Right, okay, so we've got to drive down to there first, and we book that campsite. That's the plan. And when we're there, and the weather's good and the surf is good, we might stay for a few days. And if it's not, okay, we watch the weather, watch the surf, where's it going to be good? And good weather is the priority, because if you're camping, shit weather is not good.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Yeah, shit weather when you're staying in a hotel is fine, or Airbnb is fine, but not when you're in camper vans and tents. You have to have good weather. So we then just book the next campsite, and then just drive down to it. And there's no plan whatsoever other than we'll see where we're going every few days, and you just keep doing that until it's time to drive back to the ferry. And that it's it's literally as simple as that. And people are, oh yeah, that sounds like amazing fun, because we can in 2 weeks we can do northern Spain and the whole, because we just drive for 4 hours or 5 hours for a couple of days and drive again for, and last year what happened was we went to France like we normally do. This amazing storm was coming across the west coast of England and France, and it was just like, that's not going anywhere for a week. So we just packed up and drove 9 hours to Costa Brava in the Med in Spain, spent a week in Spain, just no surf, just Mediterranean sunshine, Mediterranean sea, lots of Mediterranean beer, and very agreeable. And when the weather cleared and the fronts cleared, we drove back to Spain, back to France, and went surfing for a week. But it is, we booked the campsite en route because we didn't know where we wanted to stay, so we're driving along in a van, and it's a 9-hour trip. Well, let's just see who's got spots available, and not that okay, well, this is how we're staying here. And people are like, oh, that sounds amazing. So you just have to do it. There isn't a plan. You just have to turn up. But and it's like, you just get in a car. Do you own a car? Yeah. Well, just go and buy a £50 tent. It doesn't have to be special. Just go and try it. See, you got nothing to lose. If you don't like the campsite, go and get a €50 a night hotel. There's loads of them all across. You don't have to go on campsites. You can do really cheap hotels and just keep driving. And you can get, there are even hotels even cheaper, but the standards drop as you go down in price, sort of thing. And as we learned to our parents, like, oh, this one's really good, it's €30. Yeah, it didn't even have an ensuite toilet. The toilet was down the corridor. Yeah, and you shared it with everyone else in the hotel. So, maybe next time we'll pay that extra €10. And
better than an outhouse out back.
It wasn't quite that, but it was all code. There was no reception, and you're just like, this is a bit too primitive. It is.
You'd prefer the tent over that.
I would.
But it's funny because what you're saying of like, well, just go do it, and it's. I feel like it's back to the waiting tables of like being able to read people. It feels so easy to read those people. It's the thing that's always holding them back is fear. Yeah, and it's the fear of, well, here's all these things that could go wrong, and it's this kind of unwillingness or just fear of the chaos that's outside your door, and that is something that you can actually train your mind, as I'm sure you know, to enjoy and to confront, like almost gleefully, of like, here's this unknown, I can't wait to meet it. And the conditioned response of I don't want to meet it is built up in a lot of people.
What it made me realise, because Dunk's very relaxed about it, Duncan, and he gets itchy feet every few days, and whereas I could stay somewhere for a month and I'd be fine. It wouldn't bother me.
Yeah.
I'm not a great explorer. I'm not a great traveller by any stretch of the imagination. For somebody that travels a lot, I don't like travelling. But it makes me realise that I panic about things that don't matter. I worry about things that don't matter. Like, Dunk is just like, we'll find somewhere to camp. I won't relax until we're booked in somewhere. And I don't mean we have to be there. I don't. Once that booking confirmation's come through, that when we turn up in 4 hours, there's a campsite that we're booked in to stay.
Yeah,
I'm good. I'm fine. I don't care if it's crap. I now know where I'm going, and we're booked in, and we have a reservation, and then I'm good. It doesn't matter to me, and I don't care what the campsite is. I don't care what it's like. I don't. It's good. And whereas Dunk likes particular types of campsites, whereas I don't care. But if it's that, I'm not good with the unknown. I do like, before we set off, I won't be relaxed if we don't have a reservation, but I won't care if it takes us 10 hours to drive there. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, I mean, then to a degree you're not comfortable with it, but to a degree you are, because you're fine setting out on the journey.
Yeah, because I'm aware of it. Yeah. It's like, well, you're going to be fine. Something will happen. But we've rocked up at places with no reservation and had to go to 2 or 3 campsites, and I'm starting to think, fuck me, this is a bad idea. I'm getting pissed off. But one of the reasons I'm getting annoyed is because I don't have a camper van anymore, whereas before, I'll just sleep in the supermarket car park. I don't care. I'll sleep on the side of the road. It's fine. Whereas now I've got to pitch a tent. There's nowhere else for me to go.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's more because of that. Well, where am I going to sleep?
Yeah. Well, I mean, put the seat back and just fall asleep in the car if the worst comes to worst.
Well, because Dunk still has a camper van, so he's got his do you know what I mean? So it's just like, he's got his it's but yes, but it's funny because you become aware. But it's that's the important bit. You be aware of what you're uncomfortable with, and then you still have to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And not, I'm not doing it because it makes me uncomfortable. It's I've got to go and do this now. And it'll work itself out. Something will happen. And more importantly, you will figure out. You will do. And it's no different than starting the podcast, writing the books. Someone's like, "What's the plan?" I don't have a plan. I just know I have to start something. And like when you first wrote "Children of the Dying Hearth," you had an idea that there's a trilogy. Have you written the 3rd book yet and the 2nd book yet? And no, not yet. But
I have now.
but you had to write the first book first.
Yeah.
But you always knew that there was. But if somebody said to you, "Well, what is it?" I don't know yet. I just know that's what happens. That's the plan. That's where I'm going to take it. And but you can't explain to people. I think when this gets published, it will be the 190th episode I've done in nearly 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. I can't explain to anybody that I knew I would somehow do hundreds of episodes. I'll never be able to explain to somebody if this becomes a really big, successful podcast that goes global, and actually I become one of those few people that's lucky enough to make a living talking shit with people, then I will never be able to explain to somebody that there was a business plan, because there wasn't. There's just, I want to talk to people around the world, so I'm going to start a podcast. And what are you going to do with it? No idea, because I don't know what I'm doing. I just know how to have a conversation. And I don't even know how to set up a podcast. I fumble through it really badly.
Well, it's not to just do the Nike motto of just do it, but it really is.
Yeah.
I feel like every hyper successful person, whether it's the motivational speakers, the billionaires, whatever, it's like, you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot, but just go do it and keep doing it until you get it right.
Yeah.
And it's the fear of not doing it, which whenever so my wife and daughter are actually up at my parents' house right now, and I told them I was doing the podcast again, and they're like, "Are you gonna actually talk about the book this time?" Because most of the time we just kind of shoot the shit and talk about stuff. And I feel like that first podcast we did a bit, but I mean, we can actually draw it back to it, I think, pretty well here, because one of the things that I think is nice about the book was it's a high fantasy book, the first in the series. There's actually going to be 6 books. The first 3 are written. Second one should be published this year. Third one, I'm hoping in the next year and a half. But each one of the characters they're very different. So there's a middle-aged politician. There's a elf who's several hundred years old, but for his people, he's a child, essentially. There's a young woman who works in the city as kind of a menial job. There's kind of the archetypal hero figure as well. And then there's 2 pirates. One's older, one's younger. And each one of them, they're very different, but each one of them has that struggle that we're talking about of, I need to go out and do the thing that I'm either consciously or subconsciously afraid to do. And it's for, I mean, one of the easiest physical examples is the elf, who's not allowed to leave the borders of his homeland, but due to kind of a mishap, accident, screw up on his part, he's more or less forced to. And it's more fate that's actually driving him out into the world that he's got no clue what's going on. Because he's lived for 600 years. But outside of his borders, it's all as new to him as it is to the teenager, who's that kind of archetypal fantasy hero. And so there's actually a scene later on in the first book where the two are interacting, and the kid kind of looks at him and is like, aren't you like 600 years old? And the elf turns to him and he's like, yeah, but I've never been here just like you've never been here. So I may have a lot of experience in one area, but I don't know what I'm doing outside of that.
No.
And it's the willingness, or as I mentioned, kind of fate pushing you in that direction, which, I mean, everyday life will push you in directions you sometimes don't want to go. And whether you're a religious person, you want to say that's God acting upon you, or it's just life being chaotic. It's the embracing that kind of chaos of, what campsite am I going to be at?
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's going to make you grow as an individual, which for each of the 6 characters in the book, they each grow out of that kind of childlike fear, which is why it's titled Children of the Dying Hearth, because each one of them, in a way, would rather be a child in some sense at their crumbling, ruinous building of a home, because it's what they know. But the fate that's in store for them and what they really need to grow is outside of their dying fire, let's just say. Which, I mean, it's true for anyone, whether it's writing the book, starting the podcast, going to the gym, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got to get out there. Just do it. You're going to fail. Get over it and do it again.
But it's funny. It's because of what we did last year. We thought this year our plan is to just get the Euro train, and we're just going to drive up to Switzerland so we can then drop down into Italy. But just in case there happens to be perfect weather and perfect sunshine, we're taking surfboards. And the plan will be what it always is. About 3 days before we're due to leave, we'll get together, look at the weather, and if there's surf, we're not going to go to Switzerland and we're not going to go to Italy. We're just going to go and surf. If there's no surf, we're going to rock up in Switzerland with surfboards on a roof.
Yeah.
Stay in Switzerland for a couple of days and then drop down and go into Italy. And it's and we'll stay there, and we're like, and then if there's surf, well, we can just cut off over into France and go to France, and we might end up going all the way round. But that our only plan is what to pack. We know what to pack because we've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
It is,
yeah.
You know.
I mean, that shouldn't take more than an hour.
Yeah.
That's something I've never understood about certain people who are like, I need a day to pack. It's like, you need to travel more.
Yeah.
Here's a backpack, and you need to go. Here's a backpack. Put everything you need in it for a week. Figure it out. That sort of exercise is so helpful for people to realize, like, what do I actually need?
Yeah.
Because you don't need much.
No, I mean, one of the advantages of having, when I used to have a camper van, and it was only a converted Volkswagen T4 panel van, is I learned very quickly that the thing to do was just have your going away clothes in the van all the time. So all I ever needed to do is, if somebody said, "Oh, do you fancy going away this weekend?" Yep, no worries. What time are we leaving? Because the van was already packed from the last time. I just and that was it. I'd had clothes just for that van, because this is all I'm going to need. And once you realise this is all I need, right, when you get home, wash it and then put it back in the van. The only things that I've ever found useful to have that you want to stay on top on, painkillers, you know, ibuprofen and headaches in case you hurt yourself or you've got a headache, and a basic first aid kit with plasters. That's it. Anything else, you need a hospital anyway, so don't worry about it. You know, that's it. And as long as you've got somewhere you can go and get food or somewhere to eat, you never needed anything. And if all you're doing is surfing, you don't need much clothes, because you're not trying to entertain women. You're not going out for dinner. So it's only you that notices you stink.
And even then, just jump in the ocean for a bit.
But that's it. You know, it's just like you just smell of seawater effectively eventually. Because you're just surfing every day, and you end up, all you're doing is wearing shorts. It's a simple thing like t-shirts. Any t-shirt will do, because you're only wearing it to the beach and you're only putting it back on when you get out of the beach. That's it. And it's amazing, because people are like, well, why don't you go out for dinner? No, why not? Well, because there's no point, because you'll spend 2 hours every night trying to find somewhere nice to eat that's not booked. Just go to the supermarket, buy some food, make a sandwich. That's it.
I've always made a point whenever I travel, trying to find hole-in-the-wall places. So not some fancy restaurant, but like, what is a little kind of divey place that I could just pop in, have a burger, or have fish and chips, or have tacos, or whatever it is. And you find just the neatest places that way.
Yeah, we because we're only interested in surfing. I mean, we've been to France and northern Spain and northern Portugal a lot, so we kind of very familiar with it. But the campsites and the places to surf are often there's nothing there. The nearest village is a couple of miles away, and the nice restaurants that everyone go on about, they're in big cities where the tourists go. I don't go to that. I go to loads of places where nobody speaks English and I don't speak French, and we get on pretty well by looking at each other and pointing, and you nod or shake your head, and it works. And you go to supermarkets and buy whatever you want, and that takes care of pretty much everything. And most places I go to, there's quite a few villages I can think of, don't have a single restaurant, and the ones that do, it'll be chips and mussels they sell. I mean, it's really like, well, we're on the coast, it's fresh mussels, and we sell those with fries. You know, or we sell pizzas, or because there are no flash restaurants, because who's going to use them? So it's got to be really, it's like proper, or they're just open at lunchtime. That's it. They don't open again, or they're reservation only. You know, don't get me wrong. We do always try and find somewhere to eat, but it's amazing. Like, the more stripped down of villages and the less that's there, you really do kind of like, people are like, well, France is this amazing place with food. The cities are the big cities.
It's that the old joke. What are the three main ingredients in French cooking? It's butter, butter, and butter. So it's what you're just talking about, though. I feel like the individual that says, "Oh, that sounds so much fun," I just don't know. Throughout that whole experience, they're just asking, well, where am I going to eat? Well, like, how am I going to, if there's no restaurant, how do I communicate with the person at the supermarket? It's a weird sort of, like, figure it out. like if it's just pointing, if it's you have, I mean, it's been a while since I've been to Europe and had a phone plan over there. But when I did, I mean, I had access to Google Translate, which will do enough
Oh
for
yeah,
like, I want four of these, and then show you the phone. I mean, even that, it's the whether it's analytical thinking or problem solving skills, it's a kind of fear around. I'm afraid to try and sort through a problem. I have no idea what it might be.
yeah,
Well, that's the fun of it to me. Like that,
yeah,
and that's. But again, I think that comes from me having traveled a bit and having to condition myself to be like, I need to go into this Romanian burger joint and ask for a burger. Whether it's me going and pointing like a caveman, or it's me using broken Romanian, hey, chifash, and
yeah,
working on it. But it's this stepping into it and risking looking like a fool almost, or
yeah.
risking this new experience.
I mean, some of the best
And a lot of
places
people are
I've
like, I don't
been,
want it.
but some of the best places I've been is just because I went into a bar in the afternoon and had a couple of beers. And I can't, there's nothing unique about
Yeah,
the bar as
yeah,
such.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
remember this. We were in northern Spain, and we were in a place called Serrans, and it's like the capital of the Basque area. And it's really kind of interesting when you go into the main square. There's this big fucking banner like draped down in the middle of the main square from someone's apartment, and it just says, when I went there, it just said, "Tourists, remember, you are not in Spain. You are in the Basque region." I'm just like, okay, just so we're clear on that. Of course, we didn't know any of this.
yeah,
We didn't really think
yeah,
about that when we were going there.
yeah,
And it happened to be at the same time it was all kicking off in Barcelona. And all of these people were getting on coaches and stuff like that to go and join the riots in Barcelona and the protests because
yeah,
wanting independence. And I just happened to be on my own because a couple of them had gone off and were doing their own thing, and I wanted to do my own thing on this day. And I thought, I fancy a beer. I mean, I'll just go into the bar. And I walk into this bar, and it's basically a proper locals bar. And they're all just glued to the news because these guys are ready to fight. You know what I mean? This is the Basque country. We want independence.
yeah,
We're going to join our brothers in Catalonia. We're at one
yeah,
with the Catalonians. And I walk into this bar, and I'm looking at all the news screens, and I'm looking around at the bar, and this bar's been here for about 500 years, I guess.
yeah,
And and it's just like, and I look at the barman, and I was just like, and he was like, yeah. He spoke English. He was like, yeah, no worries. Come in, enjoy yourself. And I had about 3 or 4 beers. I didn't talk to anyone. I just been watching these people. They're like,
yeah,
who are literally kind of like getting ready to arm up against the government while having beers, egging each other on, all cheering at the screens with the Catalonians rioting with the police. And I
yeah,
just sat there like, fucking hell, it's a bit different. But it was an accident, and it was a mistake, and
yeah.
it was just I literally walked into something because I took the trouble to go and do something on my own, even though I was with
Yeah.
friends, and it just happened.
I I feel like the best experiences in life do that.
Yeah,
It's you go out and it's like, I've never been here. I don't know what's going on. I'm just gonna wander around. I'm gonna get lost. When I was in Lisbon with the soccer team I was playing with over there, we were walking around, and it was just a couple of us, and we're just walking down this hill, and we see these two very large doors, like old, like Aragorn's about to push them open and announce
yeah,
he's still alive sort of doors. Like, holy cow, these are big. This is interesting. Let's just walk in. Because there's a kind of small door within one that was open. So we walked in, and we're like, what is this place? And there's a sleepy security guard who was just surprised anyone had happened to walk in. It's like, what is this place? And he starts talking to the guide we were with. And they're going, oh yeah, and they back and forth. You can tell it's interesting. The guy turns back to us and says, this is apparently the oldest art salon in Portugal.
fuck.
It was like 14 something that it was founded. Like, shit. Like,
Yeah,
can we just walk around? And the guard's like, I don't care. Like, go ahead. And so we were just walking around. We walked upstairs. There's murals everywhere. All the walls were painted,
it's great, isn't
ceilings
it?
painted. Just gorgeous place. But there's no way I would have found that there's no way I would have had that experience if we weren't just like, let's just go get lost in Lisbon.
Yeah.
Um,
and that's it. People are just so afraid to go and do it. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? You're not going to get lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even if you are like, and I mean, should make the caveat, you don't want to do it stupidly.
Yeah.
Like in Lisbon, sure. There was another time I was in Japan, and I think it was Tokyo. I was with my family, and I was like, I'm just gonna wander around. See ya, and I just left. And my mom was terrified and worried because I'm her her son, 19 years old. Oh God, what's gonna happen to him? It's like, it's Japan. It's perfectly safe. There's no issue unless I run up to some yakuza and punch him in the nose. I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah.
If I get lost in Lisbon, it's gonna be fine. The caveat, I mean, is now you don't want to go to Baghdad or Tehran and start waving around a cross or something like. All right, there's stupid things to. Yeah, there was a couple. I think they were an American couple that wanted to go to. I don't want to misspeak here. It was. It might have been Afghanistan, because they wanted to dispel misconceptions of violence towards Westerners, and well, they did not come back. Let's say, they were both killed, and there's. This doesn't mean like I want to get out of my comfort zone, so I'm going to skydive without a parachute. You can still be sensible while engaging that fear you have of like, well, I don't speak Italian. Can I really go to Milan or Rome? It's like, yeah, you can. And you might get yelled at by some person for not speaking the native language, but
there's a guy that I watch on YouTube sometimes. He's just done Iraq and Afghanistan, I think. And he's really well travelled, and there's a few things he points out. But one of them, like, because I can't remember where he was exactly, but he did run into some trouble with some people, and he made sure he stayed in a really public place. And as soon as he saw the police or something like that, he made a point of getting their attention or something. And it was, I can't remember how he worded it. He said, but like, whenever you run into problems like this, he says, don't try to be a hero about anything. Just get really public, get really vocal if you need to. Yeah. He says, and what you really want to do is try and attract attention. He says, yeah. But yeah, he ended up being absolutely fine. But he's I think sometimes people can travel with naivety. You know, like,
oh, for sure.
You know, like, you can say, like, look, if you want to walk around the streets of Lisbon, right, you're probably going to be fine. But don't flash, you know, like it really sounds stupid when you have to tell people, don't flash jewelry around. Don't flash a mobile phone around. Don't wear a watch. Right? I don't care. I would sell you a cheap watch. No, you want to look completely like you have nothing. You know, don't walk down the street like you're going to look like a tourist because you're not from that area, but don't look like a wealthy tourist, even if you are, because you might just end up walking past somebody who isn't that trustworthy, who isn't that savoury. Yeah, and you really don't carry much cash with you. So if you actually do get mugged, they're not getting much off you. You know, because people will walk around with, you know, 600-700 euros, and they'll go in somewhere and just get out their euro. And she's like, what are you doing? You know, even if you're carrying a lot of euros, you should just have a few loose notes in your pocket, so it doesn't look like you're carrying anything. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a the naivete I see with, because the school I teach at, we do different travel programs, and every time there's a couple students who are decently traveled. There's the majority of students who it's a new experience for them, but then there's a few of those majority of students that it's a new experience, and they actively have to process, like, these people in whichever country we're in do not have the same laws, customs, beliefs, morals, whatever, as my country, and it's like actively blowing their mind as they're going through it. And it's nice as a teacher to see that, because it's like, oh, you are actually realizing there's other people in the world. Congratulations. Yeah. Now you're becoming a true kind of knowledgeable human about how the world works.
Do you know, that's... I was just going to say, sorry.
Yeah, it's...
Go on.
Go ahead.
No, ask you.
It's... The newer ones, they'll always do stupid things, though. And it's... You have to kind of... There's the... we were talking about before about management styles, and so managing kind of these things of like, what were you thinking? Yeah. Take me through the thought process of, so you wanted to fly through Amsterdam to go to Italy, and you wanted to bring weed gummies with you? As a 17-year-old, you want to fly international boundaries, which marijuana is legal in Oregon. So that's a state thing. But federally, in the United States, that's a federal crime of a Schedule I drug. You want to risk federal prison to bring weed to a location where you can fucking smoke weed? Like, what is going through your head?
I've had this conversation with British tourists going to America. You do realise weed is illegal. No, you're allowed to smoke it in the state I'm going to. No, American citizens are allowed to smoke it in the state that you're going to. You're on a visa as a non-American citizen, and it's a federal offence, which is why it doesn't get federal taxes. So if you get pulled by a cop and you've got marijuana on your gummies, weed, doesn't matter, you're committing a federal offence because you're not an American citizen. And you're not, as you're not allowed to carry guns unless you're an American citizen. Mm-hmm. I don't even think you're allowed to apply for a license unless you're an American citizen. I need to double check that, but it's the same as like people like, you got to be careful if you go out doing the gun shit out there. You need to make sure that those people are well versed with what international, because there are, you can go to gun ranges and stuff like that. But people think, oh, well, you can carry a gun in America. No. American citizens can do a lot of things, but America has a lot of strange laws for non-citizens. Whereas in the UK, if I'm allowed to do it, you're probably allowed to do it. But in America, that rule doesn't apply, because you have state laws and federal laws. And if it's a federal law, well, within that state, citizens of that state can do what the state law says. But if you're a visitor and not an American citizen, you can't. The federal law is bound you. Yeah,
that's there's a lot of. This is actually kind of my last time we talked a ton about Trump, because he was just elected.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to steer the conversation that way, but at the same time, I'm glad there's a lot of highlighting towards the kind of silliness that goes on in the federal government right now.
Yeah.
Especially with spending. But there's so many laws that, marijuana is one of the big ones. I've talked about the ethics class I teach. On previous podcasts, and one of the things that, if we have enough time in the class and we finish all the material, at the end of the class we watch it's a 1930 something movie called Reefer Madness.
Okay.
I don't know if you know of it.
I haven't seen it. That's that propaganda thing about marijuana, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a propaganda video that it's funny because it's totally shrouded in mystery about like who actually made it.
Yeah.
And like the studio behind it and everything. And it seems fairly government pushed from the lobbies, the tobacco industry and all that. But since in that ethics class, we cover a lot of issues of government propaganda and government programs. It's a fascinating movie for them, because the kids kind of realize like a lot of this is garbage.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a really funny scene in it where one of the main characters smokes, and he essentially has not a marijuana-induced reaction, but it's much more of a the top end of cocaine reaction.
Yeah.
Like they're sitting there like licking their gums or looking around, scratching their face, or and they're giggling randomly. They're just kind of cackling. It's like that's not. If you've been around anyone that's stoned. That's no.
Yeah.
They're passed out on the couch giggling to themselves, maybe. but it's funny that has permeated so long that, I mean, it's made marijuana a Schedule 1 that for us is the highest level of kind of drug offense,
Yeah.
or drug
Yeah, it's
controlling.
I think skunk is Class A in the United Kingdom as well.
Which, it's I think it's nice that the states are pushing back on that, and it looks like there might be then a federal push towards legalizing it and saying, like, this is you're not going to overdose on weed. There's no I guess extreme adverse effect in that sense. I know there can be some predispositions towards psychosis from extreme use.
I mean, the problem you get is with weed, especially, is 1960s, 70s, 80s, even 1990s weed is really mild compared to 2025 skunk.
Yeah.
And the problem with a lot of the skunk that you have today is like the rumors of what the acid was like in the 60s. Like, you know, you could drop acid in the 60s and 5 years later you might still be having problems. Whereas by the time you got to the 90s, the acid that people were allegedly taking was mild. And it would be over allegedly 12 hours later. Right? Yeah. And whereas people talk about in the 60s, I took an acid tab in the 60s and I woke up in November. You're like, fuck. Yeah. Like, what was that about then? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
you went through the time portal.
Yeah. And it's just like, and I was talking to this guy who was a former DEA agent on here. And initially we were talking about the fentanyl problem, and like people don't realize that the problem with fentanyl was, he said, like, if you do cocaine, if you do heroin, if you do a pill, ecstasy or something, even if you have a bad time, you're going to be okay. He said, you can do fentanyl once and it'll kill you. He said, it's that dangerous. He said, but people don't realize, well, my mate did it and he was fine, but he said some people have really bad reactions. He says, if you have a bad reaction to cocaine, you're just going to have a bad night. If you have a bad reaction to fentanyl, you could be dead within 15 minutes. And he was the one that was telling me about the weed. He said the problem with the weed today is it's so strong, and nobody's doing anything to regulate. And these people are purposely trying to develop stronger and stronger plants because they're literally like, hey, smoke, have one of our gummies or smoke a joint with us. And don't worry, we'll fuck you up till next Tuesday.
Well, that is, I think, one of the arguments for legalizing and regulating. Which I mean, you go into any weed shop here in Oregon, and they'll have the THC and the CBD content on it. All right, is this? Oh, it's a 35%. That's much stronger than the 15%, right? It gives that sort of clarification that then they have to go through certain checks and balances to, is this some mystery bud that's gonna wake you up on Tuesday, or is it just a fun little night watching the old Lord of the Rings Ralph Bakshi and giggling to yourself? You know,
I mean, I've always have the opinion that everything should be legal and people should have self-responsibility. But I acknowledge far more than I ever have done, it's an extremely complex situation. And what I mean by that is I still think self-responsibility should be the general rule for everybody. If you want to go and get off your head on 8 balls, go fill your boots. If you get in a car and drive and kill somebody because you're on an 8 ball, you should be charged with manslaughter and serve the time for manslaughter. And people say, but if it was illegal, it was, and I've had this argument with so many people, right? If it was illegal, they wouldn't do it. I'm an ex-offender, and you act like I didn't know what the law was. And I've tried to explain this to people. That as a general rule of thumb, there's 2 types of people in society. Because laws are not made for me. Because if they were, I'd never have broken them. I broke the law, nearly ended up in prison, right? And people are like, no, I knew what I was doing. The difference is, you obey the law. I didn't. And I would still say I'm not very much the same person today. I've just calmed down a lot and I'm not in the same situations. But if they created a law I didn't like, I'm probably just going to disobey it. like I disobeyed the laws that got me into trouble in the first place. Because that's how society works. They're for 95% of the people that will obey them. What people like me do, or did, is weigh up the consequences when we get caught. We accept that inevitably we will get caught, and this is the consequence to it. And it's not to say we think, well, it's worth it. We're just like, well, the risk of getting caught outweighs the consequence, I suppose. But it's different for everybody. I used to hang around with people who give a shit. They quite liked prison. They enjoyed prison. They understood the system. You know, for them it was a nice environment. And but it's so I think self-responsibility is something I've always been a proponent of. And my issue, the reason I think all drugs should be legalized, regardless, is you can then license and regulate something. You can't regulate something that's illegal. And
it's already regulated, and people still do it.
Right? And also, all of these so-called criminals won't need to launder money anymore. The money will go into the tax system. All the money spent fighting this will just be money that doesn't need to be spent. And I often think that's why they don't legalise it, because too many people are invested in fighting it. And all of the money that you could make from it could actually be invested in helping the people that are going to get into trouble from it. Because what people don't understand is those people are getting into trouble anyway, but there's no money to help them. And you could create a society where you teach kids from a very early age, this is what taxes do, this is our responsibility, and if you're going to take these drugs, this is how many things. Because we don't educate people about alcohol, but alcoholics you get new alcoholics every year.
Yeah.
But we're fine with that.
Yeah, a DUI every day sort of thing. Which I mean, you could make a whole case that legalize everything and tax it to the point where it will then fund rehabilitation or any sort of programs to help people with abuse issues.
Yeah, because those people already have abuse issues.
Yeah,
they already exist, and it's illegal.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem with that is we acknowledge some people call it addiction, some people call it an illness. You know, you can call it whatever you want. But if we're going to acknowledge it and then say, but we need to regulate it better, well, why don't we regulate it better legally? So you can actually turn it. It's very easy to stop 14-year-olds smoking weed. Make the age of consent 18. Yeah. We don't have, believe it or not, in the UK, we don't have a massive drink issue, because you have to be, although you have to be 18 to buy it, you have to look, if you don't look at least 25, you have to provide ID. So you don't have to be, it's not, you got to be 18 to buy it. Yeah. But the minute that you don't look that you're 25 years old, you have to produce that ID. So you might look 21. No, I still need your ID because you have to prove you're 18. So we have a culture where everybody turns up, and it has to be a specific type of ID. You can't just, here's an ID. No. There's regulated IDs that you need to carry if you want to be able to drink. You know.
Yeah, I think drinking is a fantastic example, because this is something that my American students have they're always fascinated with whenever they travel to Europe. It's like, so like you can drink at 15 or 16 or 18 here. Like, whoa, that's amazing. It's like, and they don't have a binge drinking problem. So why is that? Is it because, I mean, we were in Italy a few years ago. I mean, families will have a glass of wine with dinner.
Yeah.
And it's the 15-year-old might have a glass of wine. They might have some of the beer. But then there's not this kind of mystique or romanticization of like, I can't wait till I'm old enough to drink. And so, I'm able to drink now at 15, but it has to be in secret. So I'm just going to chug, which is a huge problem here in the U.S. This is why there's a push, I feel like it was like 10 years ago or so, towards this anti-hazing stuff that was going on at universities, because these freshmen would show up, and these seniors who had been drinking for the last several years and who were 21, they say, all right, you want to pledge to our fraternity? Well, we're going to put you through this gauntlet of drinking. And it's like, well, if you want to talk about like brotherhood,
Yeah,
why is your gauge for that? I need to get you so blacked out drunk you're pissing your pants.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not healthy.
Like that no, that's not healthy at all. But yeah, I think that's a good kind of cultural sociological case study in legalizing and not necessarily normalizing, because I mean you don't want the 15-year-old, you don't want the family doing heroin together around the table
No, no, but
at dinner.
that's it.
Like, I'm not arguing for that.
No,
But yeah,
it's you said something. It's taken away the mystery.
yeah,
You know.
and it's human nature is I want to do the thing that I'm not really allowed to do.
Yeah, it is.
Like, can I do that taboo thing? That seems kind of fun.
Because
Let me just push the boundary a little bit.
the funny thing is, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about students that go abroad, and this is the thing that's really weird. I find weird. I was what I nearly interrupted you about is they go abroad and they're stunned that the world is different from the one they know, right? But before the internet, do you remember those travel books that everyone used to buy? If you were going some of those, every bookshop would be filled with travel guides. I can't remember. There was a really famous brand of travel guide, and it would be like the Bible for whatever country you were going to. And I can't remember what it was called. But the difference is we travelled expecting a different culture. We wherever we went, it never disappointed because everything was supposed to be different. Everything was supposed to be exotic or somehow culturally challenging to what we knew.
Yeah.
And we would do so much reading, so much research, and you might just be going like, from Britain, I'm going to Amsterdam, and I want to, but I'm going to read up about all the cafes in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read all up about the red light district and the do's, the don'ts, the do's and don'ts of cafes and stuff like that. And that whole nightlife scene and everything like that. And you go prepared to see something different. And today they have everything from Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, all of these things showing different worlds, different cultures, then turned up and they're like, oh, wow, it's so different. And they're shocked by the different culture. It's like, you have it instantly. I used to have to read a 40,000 page book, slight exaggeration, but with no pictures or maybe just a couple. And I just had to absorb all of that information I could. And
yeah. And it kind of goes back to the thing I said of like, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is.
How interconnected we have, because as much as the West wants to push for multiculturalism, it's not, I feel like it's not a true multiculturalism where each culture can be itself. It's this amalgam that is then kind of forming into a global thing that it's not one or the other. Which I feel like if you go to a big city, especially in the U.S., there's different ethnic parts of the city, which that to me is the part of multiculturalism that I love. Like, you can go into Chinatown in San Francisco, and it really is like, oh, this is where a bunch of the immigrants originally settled, and they built up their shops. And I can go into a store there, and maybe the lady doesn't speak any English at all, or it's so broken, it's very hard to understand. But at the same time, I can get kind of a taste of that culture, whether it's getting their food or some service provided, whatever it is. But there's this kind of weird. Actually, I describe it. It reminds me of if you're playing with Play-Doh, where you have the different colors, and by the end of playing with it, you kind of mush them all together, and it forms this weird purpley brownish thing that's like it's no longer red and blue and green and yellow and orange. It's just kind of this weird, ugly blob, and I feel like we're going towards that.
Yeah.
And it to me, it's losing the uniqueness of each thing. I mean, it's losing the uniqueness of British culture. It's losing the uniqueness of French culture. It's losing the uniqueness of Chinese culture, of these cultures that even if people immigrate to that area, there's a funny like melding that's happening that I feel like isn't in the just an odd route for multiculturalism.
Because one of the things I'm finding interesting at the moment is, and I was reminded of this because I just stumbled across a clip of Ronald Reagan, and it was that famous clip where he's asked about how old he is, about his age, and he says, "I'm not going to let this campaign, I'm not going to let my opponents, youth and inexperience, I'm not going to mention that as part of this campaign," when they were asking him about being 80 years old. And it's just a wonderful line that only Ronald Reagan could give about, I won't let the youth and inexperience of so-and-so be a part of this campaign. And even the guy, his opponent, actually laughed. And somebody commented, I remember somebody commenting, even he knew at that moment he had lost the election, that there was no way he was going to become president. And they showed a map of America when Ronald Reagan won that election, and it must have been the first one in 1980. And every state bar one was red. And it's just like, wow, and politics then, at least on TV, was incredibly civil. And as opposed to kind of where we are today. And I'm finding this interesting because I was talking to some friends last night. We were out. And I was out the other night, and I was talking to somebody who's a local Conservative councillor, and we're all noticing, like, everyone was going about Reform and Nigel Farage, but people are starting to talk about wanting Nigel Farage to stand down because they think he's too liberal, he's too central. And I think I've talked to you about this before, that when the pendulum swings, it's going to swing, and what people call, well, he's far right, it's going to be nowhere near right enough. And I'm finding what I'm finding interesting is this really weird reaction to Donald Trump, and the fact that, because it's you would think it was common knowledge that 2 years ago Zelensky and Putin were going to try and sign a peace deal, and Biden and Johnson said, "No, you're not. We don't want you to sign a peace deal." Okay, it's not even hidden. It was just like, "No, we'll carry on supporting you in the war, and this is what we want you to do." And Donald Trump's come along and said, "I don't want you to do that, and I want this war to end, whichever way it's going to end." And from what I understand, is the deal that he's mentioned is pretty much the deal that Zelensky was going to have to sign in 2022. So, literally, it's not Donald Trump's idea. Donald Trump's just like, it's a good idea because 1.5 million young men have died, and it's time people stop dying. Right? And as everybody has said, you're never going to win the war. Just to be clear, no one's saying that what Putin did was good. What we're just saying is what we're doing is enough. It's time to it's time to scale this back now and figure out a way out before everybody in Ukraine is dead, because they're not going to beat Russia. There is no Russia that you're going to beat. And if it escalates past a certain point, you are risking a nuclear war. And
that's the thing, whether it's, you want to side or be against Putin, it's, I think the reality of the situation is the only way Ukraine will get that land back
never gonna happen.
Is if the rest of Europe or America joins. With boots on the ground.
I think the problem with that is, I think the problem with that is, I think, so first off, I think if people want to kind of understand it, that they literally have to go back to 1989 when the wall fell down, and start looking at things like the Minsk agreement and the NATO agreements, and NATO alliances and stuff like that. And they also have to understand that this is why Russia attacked Georgia and Moldova in 2007, and have been very outspoken about, if you keep pressing this, we're going to we take this as an act of war. So
if you keep moving NATO bases east, it's going to be a problem.
And I don't think they don't talk enough about the fact that Putin has already attacked previously in 2008, I think it was, Moldova and Georgia. For that very reason, they tried to become NATO countries, and Putin has rightly, when I say rightly, I don't mean as in he's right, has rightly pointed out, this is not what we agreed, and I've always said, and if you do this, as far as Russia's concerned, it's an act of war. and we will
Yeah.
retaliate, not invade, retaliate. And I think people keep misunderstanding that we are never being allied with Russia. And as far as Russia is concerned, and always has been concerned, NATO is an enemy. And there's this idea that we somehow, in the West, America and Western Europe, we're the good guys. Right. But even if you take that acknowledgement and say, I acknowledge in my heart, in my mind, that we are the good guys, well, then somebody has to be the bad guy. And if you're saying Russia is the bad guy, what do you think the bad guy is going to do when you take an action that they consider an act of war? And this is what I don't think people understand. It's never discussed in the media that from Russia's perspective, it's an act of war by NATO. Right? Well, we will go to war with you. So this idea, if we do this, Russia will back down. No. Russia has decided we're at war because you keep doing this and you did exactly what we told you not to do. So we are at war and we will escalate as much as you escalate. And having been to Moscow 5 times and know a lot of Russians, they look at the West the way the West looks at Russia. This, because one of the things that I was talking to somebody about this the other day, Russians hate the fact that every Hollywood movie paints Russia as the bad guy and America as the good guy. Because Russians like, you lot are fucking arseholes. And actually, nobody else in the world likes you. And America doesn't realise, like, only recently Donald Trump sat down and has signed in a trade deal with India. Right? And the only reason that's really important is because India's biggest ally is Russia. Because when Pakistan and Russia were, and India were at war in the 60s, the US took Pakistan's side. So Russia came to the aid of India. So if there was a global war, India is on Russia's side, just like China is, just like most of the African continents are. There was a thing a couple of years ago when they were, I think it was a G8 or G20 or something, they were having it in South Africa. And they, obviously Putin was supposed to go. And they said, well, we've got a warrant out for his international arrest. And South Africa said, not in our fucking country you haven't. Oh yeah, but it's an international arrest warrant and we want you to arrest him. Putin hasn't done anything to us. He's not our problem. He helps us more than you ever helped us. Yeah. And there's this weird, and you get it in the United Kingdom as well. Don't get me wrong, it's not just where we think we're something. No, the rest of the world thinks we're fucking idiots. They don't like us. It's us that think we're fucking revered. Because that's what every film...
Well, I mean, my point though about Ukraine was like there's this kind of idealistic pie in the sky attitude from the West of like, well, we'll make an agreement and we'll go back to the way things were. It's like that's not the way any of this. Like that's never the way that warfare.
Russia and Ukraine have had a kind of weird civil war going on for 20 years.
Yeah.
So what we're going back to that?
I mean, it's a. There's a scholar, he's a classics guy who was talking about this push that Trump's doing to try and be like, we need peace.
Yeah. And
it's indicative of a larger thing that he was describing as Trump isn't the revolutionary. He's not any of that. He's the counter-revolutionary. That for the last 15 years or so, there's been social pushes, there's been political pushes for the kind of globalization of everything to come together, whether it's the demonization of Russia or just the different social movements that have been happening in the West and in the United States especially, that Trump's presidency and his push is more a return to normalcy than it's an actual revolution. Try not to say anything that might get this flagged or anything, but I'm just thinking of was it Tavistock just went back on their or they had that study about gender affirming care.
Okay.
that it's they found no long-term benefit of it.
Yeah.
And that alone, this weird push. I mean, it's objectively weird to say, I don't feel right in my body, I'm therefore going to cut something off of it. That is not the that is not a healthy form of psychosis. That's
the thing that's really strange about this is, in any other way, it would be recognized for a mental illness. You know?
And it has been for years.
Yeah, we know it commonly as body dysphoria.
Yeah.
But somehow, there's that wonderful meme. If you have to tell children, we need to normalize this, it's not normal.
Not normal, yeah.
Right? If you have to emphasize, we have to normalize it, it's not normal. And there's something... And this is, I mean, you and I have spent hours talking about this on camera and off camera, where like there's this weird thing going on with you guys at the moment where you've got this, Donald Trump is literally showing where billions of taxpayers' money is going. And it's been laundered, it's been wasted.
Yeah.
And even in this country, people are just like, yeah, but he's going to start World War III. How? He's trying to get peace.
If anything, he's stopping World War III.
Yeah. So then they go, but that's because he's a Russian puppet. Right. But you realise how many billions of dollars they finding out has been given fraudulently to the war. Yeah, but he's the enemy. He's right wing. But you keep saying these soundbites. What is it that he's particularly done? And like you and I discussed before, from all accounts, people that seem to meet him and know him in person say he's actually one of the nicest, most generous guys you'd meet, right? But let's just, for the benefit of clarity, let's say he's the most horrible, disgusting person, and you wouldn't want him round your house for dinner. Okay, let's go with that. I'm fine with that. Okay. I still need to know what it's doing in terms of policies that are bad. Like, what's he overturned? Because he seems to be pointing out, which you were all pointing out before, why is it that a senator or a governor on a £250,000 a year salary is worth $50 million, all of us, you know, in 10 years? And he's pointing out that they've been taking these funds, they've been taking these money. And you're like, and that's suddenly bad. And I'm like, you have to make this make sense. The same as when we go back to the gender affirming ideas. Now you have to make this make sense. And they're like, well, it's the ones. Well, it's complicated. How? How is it complicated? Because again, it's. I used to sort of say it's a really clumsy analogy, but actually it's simplistic. If you get that meme kind of thing that goes around and does the rounds every now and again, if you put 100 women and 10 men on an island and come back in 500 years, you'll have a society, right? Yeah. If it's gone really well, you've probably had 2 civil wars, and but if you get 100 transgender men and 10 men on an island and go back in 200 years, you've got 110 skeletons of a male.
Transgender women, yeah.
Sorry, transgender women, yeah. Right. That's how confused I am by the subject. I don't even know which one is which. All right, but you've got 110 male skeletons. That's all you've got is a graveyard. Yeah, and you don't have 500 generations, so to speak. Yeah, and it is actually that simple. It's not more complicated than that. It's just that simple. And the fact that they're always throwing in these complications to try and make something make sense is why it's never going to make sense. But we're just constantly going, I don't know. And you know that it's like the phrase was cognitive dissonance used to be a lovely buzzword that I used to love 10 years ago. I probably discovered the word 11 years ago. And then for the next 10 years, like cognitive dissonance was my thing. And but it's like this global cognitive dissonance, isn't it? It's just like, regardless of any evidence, people are just like, no, he's just a bad person. And you just like, and we've got this stuff going on in the UK, like you and I, like the police going around to arrest that woman. You and I were talking about that video on Instagram that you sent me, and they went around to arrest a woman because she put something on Facebook about Keir Starmer she didn't like, that he didn't like, and it's like the fact that somebody in his party even noticed it enough that they reported it, and then the police actually went and did it, and then when it made national news, the police station backtracked and said, oh no, it was a mistake, it should never have happened. And we've just had this thing go through Parliament, and it's been picked up on a few YouTube channels, not much in the mainstream news, where they've actually said it. If you are an ethnic minority, you should get a lesser sentence than a white native person. And we've actually become a two-tier system. Hence two-tier steer, which is what he doesn't... Two-tier Keir, which he doesn't like to hear. But we've actually become a two-tier justice system. And it's actually now in writing. It's being pushed through Parliament. I mean, people are coming out saying they think it was an oversight. It's not how it was supposed to have come out. But the fact that nobody stepped in and said, you can't punish one group of people because they're white more than you punish somebody else because they're an ethnic minority, so they have to have now in law a lesser sentence.
Yeah. Well, it's I like always going back to one of our great authors on this side of the pond, Mark Twain, saying politicians are like diapers. They need to be changed frequently and for the same reason. Yeah. And, I mean, you saying it's an oversight, to me, is giving more leeway than I would ever give a politician. And I think it's this idea that most people want to have this idea that if something bad happens or something was not intended to do something, we want to have this kind of honest, it was a mistake. Yes. But I think statistically you would have a hard time showing you did not rise to that level of political importance or business importance without having the analytical and kind of cognitive awareness of what you are doing and the effects it will cause. So it's not, this is an unintended byproduct. It's like, no, what it does is what it's meant to do. Yes. So if what it's doing is wasting a lot of money by funneling it back to your spouse, which is what the USAID is finding, it's that's not a bug in the system. That is the feature of the system. They're finding, I can go send $2 million over to Colombia for something, and I'll do that by sending it to a charity that's set up, that my wife has set up, and she pays herself, she pays our kids, she pays a family member, each a 6-figure salary, and then we'll send $10,000 over to Colombia at the end of the day. And at that point, you're just funneling money.
They're currently looking into the Tahiti money, aren't they?
They've been
because this has been rumored for a long time.
I mean, you would say rumored. I mean, I could own this opinion on my end. I would say it's been proven. Anytime the Haitians are interviewed about this, we haven't seen any money from the Clinton Foundation. And it's pretty much been tracked through third parties, basically saying it went to a contracting friend, it went to their daughter, it went to everyone under the sun but the Haitians to help rebuild Haiti. And this is why, I mean, the stuff that happened like in Maui with the fires, or the stuff that's happening in LA, or the stuff that happened in North Carolina with the storm. Anytime there's a celebrity that gets up and says donate to this XYZ thing, it's anyone who has some knowledge of tax laws over here knows those charities are essentially being used as partial tax evasion. It's a way to make me look really good, and it's a way for me to funnel money so I don't pay taxes at the end of the day, because it's for charity. And you mentioned cognitive dissonance. We talked about this last time, but like on a grander scale, it's ideologically captured. And so whether it's Trump or whether it's Elon Musk, this idea that whatever an individual does, I mean, State of the Union address, he had a young black kid that was fighting or beat cancer.
Yeah, the secret agent.
And yeah, and they said, we're going to give you an honorary Secret Service degree or Secret Service agent thing because this is your dream, this is kind of your wish and everything. And it's the immediate response to it is there's a very anti-Trump message with it. And it's like, is there anything, and I think this is a good way for people to engage in political discourse, of saying, is there anything I can do or say that will change your mind? And I think a lot of people want to say yes, but then when they're confronted with an issue, for instance, I've seen a bunch of videos of, I talked about this last time as well, the Very Fine People hoax, where he's like calling people in Charlottesville that they're very fine people on both sides. A couple seconds later, not talking about the neo-Nazis, white supremacists. First part of that clip gets played ad nauseum, and once that clip is a fantastic, I think, gauge to saying, like, are you able to actually break free from this mindset you have about him, or are you going to find an excuse to say, like, oh, well, he's just code wording it, or he's just doing something schemy about it? If that's the case, when it's a very clear fabrication about him, and this is, I think, the sad part for me, is there is no useful or fruitful way to engage with that person anymore.
No.
Because they're so ideologically captured that you cannot actually, the wall behind me is blue. If they're so ideologically captured, it's like, nope, it's red.
Yeah.
I can't. There's nothing we have to say to each other anymore.
Well, there was an interesting article in the Guardian, and it came up on my newsfeed, and it was about the whole Zelensky Donald Trump interview, where it all went just terribly south. But the Guardian, and so bear in mind, this is the Guardian, which is a left-wing mainstream paper in the United Kingdom, for anybody that doesn't know about it. And trust me, they are not Trump supporters in any way, shape or form. Do you know? Christ, they wouldn't even, they're so left, they wouldn't be Democrat supporters, you know. But you know, but they can allow you to identify any which way you want. But they pointed out something which I just found fascinating, because it came from the Guardian, is that before that meeting was set up, there was effectively, give or take a few details, an agreement in place that you sign the mineral rights, and we will sort out the security, because effectively we're going to put US companies and US citizens there, so we're going to provide American security. Okay. And Zelensky was told by his own advisors and by the White House advisors, this is what's going to happen, but we're not going to say anything about it, because Trump is still negotiating a few things with Putin, and you haven't signed the minerals agreement. Sign the minerals agreement, we will then announce what we're going to do with security measures, because it's an American interest, because we're going to put American businesses there. And Putin knows this. Okay? But these mineral rights, a lot of them border the very place where there's a problem. But we're not, but we have to announce it in this order. Okay? So he was briefed exactly. And apparently, allegedly, he was even briefed about, the J.D. Vance and you don't get on. So don't provoke him. You should probably wear a suit. They don't like the fact you don't turn up at the White House. They don't feel like you're respecting them. So be careful about what you say in front of the cameras. And please remember, this is not the Biden administration. And Donald Trump does not like the fact you've had $350 billion. And nor does anyone in the Republican Party, and nor do most Americans. So please, just be careful. And there's if you don't, it's very hard to find the clip, as it always is. But Zelensky says something at near the beginning of the meeting, the original meeting when they start filming, and Donald Trump literally holds his hand up and says, are you sure you want to do this in front of the media? And Zelensky goes off, and Donald Trump just sort of sits there and says, let's fucking do it then. And that's when it descends. But Donald Trump kind of is like, hang on, you can see he's like, hold on, mate, this isn't what we... Don't think you're going to put me on the spot in front of the people, the American people, because I've made my promises. Obviously I'm paraphrasing for his thoughts, but it's just like, and then you've got JD Vance on the other side, who you probably see is just like, I'm so glad you're a fucking idiot, because now I'm going to get the same piece. And
which I keep seeing his clip of when Zelensky asks, like, have you been to Ukraine? And he's like, no, but I've watched the videos of, and then he goes into kind of clunky detail about the kind of conscription kidnapping. And those are terrifying. I keep seeing those of kind of vans in Ukraine pulling up, like, oh, here's a male, get him. And I saw one the other day of a guy screaming as he's being thrown to a van. He's like, I have a kid at home. I need to take care of my kid. You can't take me. And they say, we don't care. And this is a thing that it's very depressing to think about our politics right now, because you have one side that classically has been the anti-war side now saying, I want more of this because the orange man wants to stop it. And so you have a party that basically is saying whatever he does is bad. It's like he wants peace. He wants people to stop dying over there. Is he going to get something out of it? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if they're getting mineral rights, then they're getting something. But at the end of the day, if it's...
But Donald Trump pulled up Macron on that.
Young men, or men in general, aren't...
But Donald Trump pulled up Macron, the French president, on the money thing. He says, you want your money back, and you're going to... Oh, but we'll talk about that at a later date, if they've got the money. And Donald Trump went, you know that you want your money back. So stop lying. And Macron's like, oh, no, it's not like that. It is like that. It's always been like that.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it both frustrating and fascinating, because, like you say, people forget that that there's I think it's no male between 18 and 60 is allowed to leave Ukraine because they have conscription. You have to fight on the front line. And again,
to the point now they're kidnapping.
But what do you think they're going to do? Because if you try to leave, you get arrested. You're not allowed to leave if you're a male between a certain age. And people don't realise that this is what's going on. It's like, no, these are volunteers who are fighting for their country. No, they're not volunteers fighting for their country. This is conscription. You don't have a choice. And I mean, it's one of those strange ones as well, where people seem to think that somebody's going to win something. And I seen a statistic a few months ago about, because of the amount of native Ukrainian men who are getting wiped out. If it carries on, Ukraine won't exist in a couple of years, because there'll be no effectively breeding men left. And the women will leave the country. It will just become a country that's not existent. For a war that, and
that's sort of, I said before, like, there's no effective way that Ukraine is going to regain any of the lost ground without boots on the ground from other countries. And it's, our population doesn't want that at all. Things I've seen from, I mean, I saw Keir Starmer was saying we're ready and willing to help with boots on the ground. And I have a hard time believing the men of the UK are like, I can't wait to go die in Ukraine to a drone that bombs me.
I don't.
What do you guys care about Ukraine?
Well, this is thing, because again, I've mentioned memes a lot in this episode. That people are starting to say, so, if you've got a Ukraine flag in your bio, don't forget to go and sign up and go and fight on their lines. Because I think that's something that's an interesting tide that's turning. People are getting tired of the internet protest, the internet support. No. If you support them, go over to the front lines and fight for them.
Yeah. And this, we may want to end here in a bit because I actually have to get going.
Yeah, no worries. As always, we've got a couple of hours.
Yeah. But I think this is maybe a good topic to end on, is this kind of arm sleeve virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Where it's, I'm going to wear my patch to show you what I support. It's like, all right, go do it. And it's like, well, I can't right now. It's XYZ reason. And I know it's predominantly, when they've done studies on it, it's predominantly among liberal demographics. It's also predominantly among white women that this comes up. Which, I mean, this is to loop back to our last conversation about the patriarchy and feminism. White women have the least amount to lose in war. And for the feminists that might want to come at me and say, well, if we get attacked and, they might come into the house and rape me. It's like the person at the door is going to be the man. And whether that's the door of the country that's saying, like, I mean, all the Ukrainian men are dying.
Yeah.
Whereas the women are free to leave the country. They're not the ones. I mean, and if you want to say, oh, I'm suffering because I left my house, I don't have strong enough words for you to convey the disdain I have for the narcissism you're showing of, I have to leave my home while my brother, my dad, my son, my grandpa, my cousin, every male family member
is dead,
is going and getting bombed.
Yeah.
Like,
but you're sitting in a nail salon.
Your house sucks, but
you're living in England, sitting in a nail salon, having your nails done.
Yeah,
and I know that happens.
That level, that to me is so disgusting of a viewpoint of poor me. I have to suffer through X, while meanwhile someone's suffering through X to the 10th power of it.
Just as we're on that subject of white liberal women, I had a conversation a couple of months ago, and then we're going to have to finish.
Let's really get in trouble.
Let's finish on a ban. Yeah. And we were pointing out a certain issue with a certain religion that is coming to the United Kingdom, and you're just being racist.
Now we're really, we're really getting there. Let's do it.
It's like you're being racist, David. And I was like, no. Do you know what? I said, this is the funny thing.
Yeah.
I said, you're a fucking feminist who goes on about all your rights.
Mm-hmm.
If this carries on and Sharia law comes a thing, you will be told to shut the fuck up and know your place. And if you don't, you will be publicly beaten. Or killed. Yeah, but you think I'm the problem. I'm the one trying to protect you, because what's going to happen is you won't exist anymore. And all of these countries where you want to bang on about how they have no women's rights is what you're inviting to the United Kingdom. And that's what we're trying to stop. Hey, guess what? I don't actually like the fact you never shut up, but I think you should have a right to do it.
So I don't, what is that quote? I may not agree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Yes.
Sort of thing.
It's exactly that.
There's since you did mention Sharia, I'll say a kind of, a neat kind of, I think, litmus test for it is, what does it say about what should you do to a Christian or a Jew, anyone of the book?
Yes.
What should you do of someone not of the book? And what should you do to someone who has left the faith? Are any of those three questions answered by can you answer any of those theologically with either the Quran, the Hadith, surahs, both of them, Sharia law, in any way that leads to coexistence?
No.
Because all three of those answers are death, subjugation, taxes. Taxes, subjugation kind of go together, but it's there's not a
There's no coexistence.
there's no coexistence when you ask those questions. So it doesn't matter if you're Christian or Jewish or atheist or Hindu or Buddhist or Jainist or pagan, any one of those. There's an answer in the Quran for how a good Muslim should treat you, and it is not one you want.
And that's where we're going to stop.
So we'll get banned on that one.
Yeah. We'll get banned for telling the truth because I live in a two-tier system. So, and on that note, I will be arrested. So,
no.
But yeah.
Well,
I will write to you from my prison cell.
You're always welcome over here.
It could happen.
Maybe you can you do like
prison exchange.
Edward Snowden and just flee to Moscow. Yeah, you're not a gargantuan female WNBA player, so you're not going to be exchanged by us.
No, unfortunately, nobody wants me. But as always, it's been amazing to speak to you. And just quickly, where can people find the books?
So first book is up on all major online retailers. You can get the physical copy as well. Physical copy came out last year. Worked on that just myself. The second book I'm hoping will come out this year. That's the goal right now. There's been some delays with that. Partially is because the third book, the rough draft of it, is now fully written. I'm going to send that off to a kind of a pre-editor right now just to see what they think of everything now that it's for the most part buttoned up. But the second book I sent to my new editor, and she got back with those, and so I just need to go through those edits and design a cover, and that second one should be coming out soon. Which the title of the first one, Children of the Dying Hearth, is out now. As I said, the second one should be out this year, and that will be called The Culling of Souls.
The Culling of Souls.
And that deals... Well, the first one deals with getting out of the comfort place. The second one is more concerned with removing aspects of yourself that are holding you back.
It's a nice jump.
Whatever that might be.
Children of the Dying Hearth, Culling of Souls.
Yeah.
I like how that,
Yeah, because it's I mean, both the whole series, really, the underlying theme is personal growth.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what age, race, demographic, doesn't matter. The core principle of how to grow, first one, is get uncomfortable. Go where you're not comfortable. The second book, mainly, is about sometimes you are holding yourself back. And you needed to kind of excise that. That's where that culling comes from, Culling. Sometimes you have to cull part of yourself and say, you know what? This aspect is holding me back from being the author I want to be, from being the podcaster, from being the gym rat or the CEO, or being a mother, right? Yeah. My wife deals with this, of the perception of mothers are looked down upon, and she loves motherhood.
Yeah.
And there's a part of her that she needs to kind of excise and say, it's fine for me to want to be this. This is okay. But she needs to then cut out that part of herself that is then belittling that profession, you could call it.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has that internal monologue, whether it's fear or maybe an old family member that is their voice saying, you shouldn't do this, give up, that sort of thing. Cut it out of yourself, remove it. And so that one should be out this year.
Cool. Look forward to it.
All right.
And there you have it. Martin and I talking about what we believe, don't believe in, putting the world to rights in our own little way. But the purpose of these podcasts really is to introduce you to people so that you'll check out their work and maybe you enjoy the conversation. At least maybe, hopefully, as much as I do. So do please check out Martin's books. The link is in the description. And as always, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.